Everyone thinks they know the story of the Montreal Screwjob. November 9th, 1997, the night Vince McMahon, the owner of the World Wrestling Federation, double-crossed his most loyal champion, Bret the Hitman Hart, live on pay-per-view. It's wrestling's most infamous story, a tale of real-life hatred that changed the business forever. But what if that infamous betrayal wasn't the death of the WWF, but the secret to its survival? What if I told you the single most controversial moment in wrestling history was actually a happy accident? This is the untold story of how Bret Hart's ugly exit didn't just change the business, it saved it from total collapse. So, how could one night in Montreal save a company? Well, first, you have to understand just how close that company was to the edge. By 1997, the WWF was getting hammered. For years, they had been the kings of professional wrestling, an empire built on superheroes like Hulk Hogan. But the game had changed. Their competition, Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling, WCW, was winning the war. They had poached the WWF's biggest names, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. They had the NWO, the hottest thing in wrestling, and for 83 consecutive weeks, their flagship show, Nitro, beat WWF Raw in the TV ratings. The WWF, meanwhile, was in what some have described as a period of great financial peril. Their cartoonish style felt old and stale. Attendance was down, and pay-per-view numbers had dropped. Stories from that time, more like locker room lore than documented fact, even tell of water coolers being repossessed from corporate headquarters. This wasn't just a slump, it felt like a crisis. And through it all, one man stayed loyal: Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret was the opposite of the old cartoon characters. He was a wrestler's wrestler. The excellence of execution, respected by everyone in the back and loved by fans worldwide. In 1996, with a huge offer from WCW on the table, Bret chose to stay with the WWF. He signed a highly unusual 20-year contract, a deal reportedly worth millions, structured to keep him with the company first as a top performer and later in a backstage role. Less than a year later, Vince McMahon had to admit a devastating truth. The company was under such financial stress that he couldn't afford the very deal he had offered. In a move that was unheard of, McMahon encouraged his own champion to take the money from their biggest rival. The captain was being told to get off the ship. The plan was for Bret Hart to leave the WWF after the Survivor Series pay-per-view, which, of all places, was being held in his home country of Canada, in Montreal. There was just one huge problem. Bret was the WWF champion, and his opponent? His real-life arch-nemesis, Shawn Michaels. The animosity between Hart and Michaels wasn't just for the cameras. It was a genuine, personal hatred that had been brewing backstage for years. Bret, citing a degree of creative control in his contract, refused to lose his final WWF match to a man he despised, especially in his home country. As Bret understood it, he had an agreement with Vince McMahon. The plan, according to Bret, was for the Montreal match to end in a disqualification. He would then forfeit the championship the next night on Raw and leave on professional terms. He swore he would never take the WWF Championship belt to WCW. His honor wouldn't allow it. But Vince McMahon was paranoid. He couldn't shake the image of his champion showing up on WCW television with the title, even with Bret's promise. The fear was too great, the stakes too high. And so, a secret plan was hatched in a hotel room in Montreal. On November 9th, 1997, the world watched as Bret defended his title against Shawn Michaels. Late in the match, Michaels locked Hart into his own signature move, the sharpshooter. Hart wasn't submitting, he was reversing the hold, just as they'd planned. But then, it happened. Referee Earl Hebner, on direct orders from Vince McMahon at ringside, screamed for the bell. The timekeeper rang it. Shawn Michaels' music hit. In the confusion, Shawn Michaels was declared the new WWF champion. Bret Hart never gave up. He'd been screwed. The fallout was immediate. A furious Hart spat in McMahon's face. Backstage, wrestlers were stunned at the public betrayal of a respected veteran. The legendary Mick Foley was so disgusted, he reportedly sat out the next night's show in protest before being convinced to return. And in a moment that has become legend, Bret Hart confronted Vince McMahon in the locker room and punched his boss in the face. The Montreal Screwjob should have been a public relations disaster. They had alienated their Canadian fans, disrespected a legend, and exposed the business in the ugliest way possible. It looked like the final nail in the coffin for a company already on life support. But then, something incredible happened. 8 days after the Screwjob, Vince McMahon sat down for a TV interview. For years, audiences knew Vince as a friendly announcer. While he was the owner, he wasn't the on-screen character he was about to become. On this night, he looked into the camera and said the 4 words that would change everything. Bret screwed Bret. In that moment, the villainous Mr. McMahon character was truly born. While the seeds of the Attitude Era and Vince's authority figure role had been planted earlier, the Screwjob was the catalyst that poured gasoline on the fire. McMahon leaned into the real-life hatred fans now had for him. He became the evil, tyrannical billionaire boss who would do anything to get his way. And every great villain needs a great hero. Turns out, the WWF already had one waiting. Stone Cold Steve Austin had been building steam for over a year. His Austin 3:16 speech was a flashpoint, but with Mr. McMahon, he now had the perfect enemy. The beer-swilling, anti-authority rebel finally had the ultimate authority to rebel against. The Austin versus McMahon feud felt real because its foundation was real. It was the story of every working-class person who ever wanted to give their boss the finger, and it became arguably the most influential and profitable storyline in wrestling history. The Austin-McMahon rivalry became the engine of the Attitude Era. It was edgy, must-see TV. Fans who had switched to WCW started coming back. Raw's ratings climbed, and by April 1998, they were finally beating Nitro again. The WWF wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The momentum from the Attitude Era was so massive that it helped the WWF surge ahead. While WCW's eventual collapse was also due to its own internal mismanagement and corporate politics, the WWF's resurgence was the driving force that put them in a position to eventually buy their competition. You can draw a straight line from that one desperate, controversial decision in Montreal to everything that followed. Without the Montreal Screwjob, there is no Mr. McMahon character as we know him. Without the ultimate evil boss, does Stone Cold's anti-hero character become the biggest star in the history of the business? It's the ultimate what if. The betrayal of Bret Hart, an act born of fear, inadvertently gave the WWF the one thing it desperately needed: a real-world story, a true villain, and a level of attitude that would redefine the industry. Bret Hart went to WCW, but his time there was marred by bad booking and ultimately a career-ending concussion from a kick delivered by Goldberg in December 1999. He became an unwilling martyr, a legend whose sacrifice, though unintentional, became the bedrock upon which his old company built its new empire. The night he was betrayed wasn't the end of the WWF. It was the night the old WWF died, and the Attitude Era was truly born. So, was the Montreal Screwjob the greatest thing to ever happen to Vince McMahon? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look into wrestling's secret history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more.